Hey everyone, I just wanted to put together some of these Fantasy Grounds tutorials because Fantasy Grounds is an awesome program, but it definitely has some hidden features, we'll say. I think the user experience is not so intuitive. Once you figure it out, it's very useful, but definitely not intuitive. So this first video, I'm going to do these in segments, and this first one I think we want to create a new character. So I went ahead and I deleted Audubon from the list, and I'm going to show you guys what I do to create characters. Now, you guys aren't going to create them. I pretty much manage that if you're in one of my games. But I think it's good to know what goes into it so you know what to expect from Fantasy Grounds. So the first thing I do is I find your character sheet. Okay, so I got Audubon's D&D Beyond character sheet. We're not doing any instruction videos for D&D Beyond because the reason we use D&D Beyond is it's so easy. So it walks you through everything really easy. So I can either right click out here and go to create item, or I can hit this little plus down here, create a new character sheet. Because the last one I had selected was Audubon, it already selected his portrait. However, I noticed it did not select his token. So if I reselect the portrait, it usually creates a token out of that portrait. So that works. Okay, so normally in here, what I would do, just to show you guys real fast, if you wanted to use Fantasy Grounds completely, then I'd give him a name. And then I'd come down here and say, okay, so he's a bard. So player handbook, drag bard onto here. I would select the couple things that he's supposed to be good at, or whatever in here. Says pick 3. Okay, so I picked that. And then you'll notice down in the chat window, all these skills were added. So this one action is basically like a shortcut wizard, dragging the class onto there. It did more than just add the class. It added Bard here with a link to the Bard class details. And it added the hit dice and everything. Added this caster thing there, which I don't fully understand actually. Off spellcasting on pact magic. Oh, that must be for warlocks or whatever. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, I would drag the class on there. I drag the race on there. I drag everything, and it adds piece by piece skill proficiencies. It adds abilities. It adds everything that you need. It adds your starting inventory, and that's great. But the thing that sucks about Fantasy Grounds here is two things. First, you can't access your character sheet offline. I have to host the game, and you guys have to join it, and you can then access your in-game character sheet. Second, if you screw up something, or get knocked down a level, or whatever, you have to figure out what the things you dragged onto the sheet added, and then individually remove those things. So I'd need to go remove those skill things. Luckily, I mean, the chat has kind of a manifest of what it did, but sometimes it can be very cryptic, and it's almost easier most of the time to just start the sheet over, which is exactly what I'm going to do, because it is way faster. So I'll right click, create item. This time it didn't pre-select the portrait. Okay, I'm going to put Audubon back on there. Make sure it's spelled right. Yep. Okay, so what I do is kind of this hybrid approach. I want the cool stuff in Fantasy Grounds. The ability to come to this Actions tab and roll attack rolls and damage dice and saving throws. The ability to come in here and roll skill checks off the skills tab or the main tab. I want to be able to do all that. All the stuff that rolls the dice. The one thing D&D Beyond does not do is roll dice. It just gives you dice formula, and that's it. Okay, so I've got Audubon on here. I'm going to go ahead and manually add a class, and I'm just going to call it Bard. Now, manually typing everything and doing everything prevents me from having to drag stuff and figure out what the dragging does to the sheet and all that, and then also makes it so I don't have to buy any Fantasy Grounds content. So I've already bought some before I kind of figured out my process. But I have it like everything on D&D Beyond, and I don't have everything on Fantasy Grounds. So sometimes I'm going to run into stuff you guys choose on D&D Beyond that I don't have, excuse me, that I don't have here on Fantasy Grounds. And so adding the class manually like this makes it so much easier. So I don't exactly know totally what this does, but I go ahead and just choose it anyway because I know that's what it does when it adds the class. Something about 1 times like your base ability, which I think for a bard is like charisma for your spell casting. I don't know. Anyway, you can change this I'm sure it's in the Fantasy Grounds manual somewhere. If you're a Warlock, I think you check that. Okay, and then I come over here and I click long rest just because it's the quickest way I know to see what your hit dice is. And not long rest, excuse me, short rest. There it is. And you have 1d8 for hit dice. So I'll go ahead and take the d8 from down here and stick it in that slot. Yeah, see, a lot of these things aren't intuitive. I'd never realized I was supposed to drag some of these things into these fields. I had to do a lot of reading and studying so to figure all that out. But this thing is very context menu. We're right-clicking and drag and drop heavy, Fantasy Grounds. Once you get used to that, it kind of clicks into place. Okay, so his background, I put that just for completeness. Agent, so he's a faction agent. I could go find the background here, faction agent, and link it, but it's probably going to add stuff or ask me to choose skill proficiencies and stuff like that. So I don't. I tend to avoid doing any of the dragging stuff. Okay, so he's a half-elf, so I manually populate that too. Again, I could drag it if I wanted to. So he's a Bard 3. Oh, and you'll notice in the class thing here, when I change this field, I hold Control and then I mouse wheel, and that's what lets me adjust the number. Otherwise, you can click the field and then type a number, and that will change it. Okay, so that's how you manipulate some of these fields. Alright, so the very next thing I do is check for dark vision. So dark vision 60 feet. Yep. Okay, and I put that right here. Okay, because it's just right there in the middle. Easy, quick field. Alright, the next thing is I do all the abilities. I come over to D&D Beyond and I just kind of say these out loud real fast. I deliberately put the ability scores on top and the modifiers in the circle because it matches Fantasy Grounds. That's the only reason. By default, it does it the other way around, which I don't really have a preference there. I'm sure it's one of those internet wars people have. But this way I can just go 8, 12, 13, 11, 15, 17. 8, 12, 13, 11, 15, 17. Okay, so 8, 12, 13, 11, 15, 17. So 15, 17. The other thing is you have to set these base values based on your sheet. So if you wanted to do it right in Fantasy Grounds and build a sheet that matches D&D Beyond, you need to come to your abilities and put the raw numbers that you took from here onto the sheet before you drag anything onto it, because then the race and the class or whatever, they can manipulate those ability scores with the pluses or minuses that you get from your racials and your class stuff. If you try to set these up after that, it's screwy. It's hard to figure out. So you got to set the base values there first, because different things can manipulate the resulting modifier, the resulting score. So the base things that the ability scores that you rolled, you got to do that there. So here's all the math of stuff that it can add. And in Fantasy Grounds, it doesn't show you anything easy like that. So you just kind of end up with, oh crap, these abilities are off from what I have on D&D Beyond, but I'm not sure if I missed something or if I need to just manually up them, whatever. So this is, again, doing these shell sheets, as I call them, because they're kind of just shells of real Fantasy Grounds sheets. You don't have to worry about that, because you can just put these numbers to exactly what you want, hold Control, mouse wheel, and you can change them. These I've found saves. They are calculated for you. The only thing you have to do is set what you're proficient at by clicking these little stars. So I'll look at Audavon, go back to his resulting character sheet here, and he is proficient in Dex and Charisma. So Dex and Charisma. Okay, and then I look at his max health, which is 21, and we'll put that in there. And I check if they have special movement. So speed 30, no special movement. Okay, so I'll set their speed to 30. Initiative is +2, so I'll change that to +1. Armor class has one more, probably because he's got something equipped that I'm not going to actually equip in Fantasy Grounds. So I just manually adjust the AC to whatever their AC is. So adjusting these numbers and stuff, this is what I do before every game, for everyone's sheet. So it can be a tiny bit tedious, but it's worth it. That's it for this front page. The next, I go through the skills tab. Oh, and his is kind of hilarious because he is half proficient at everything, and then proficient in something, because this is the Bard thing. Okay, so half proficient acrobatics. You have to click it a few times. So in Fantasy Grounds, you click it once for proficient, twice for double, and then again for half. So animal handling is also half. Okay, Arcana is full. Athletics is half. Deception, he's double proficient in. history half, insight. I should have probably picked a different character for this tutorial. It's okay, it'll be just a sec. And half for each of these. Medicine and nature are also half. Okay, perception and performance are full, and that one's double. Half, full, half, half. Okay, stealth survival. Yep, okay. That's it for that. And I don't have to touch anything else, usually. So, we're good there. The only thing I add on abilities, this is mostly just for notes, so that the player can access their sheets and all the abilities their character has. This usually just fills up with text and then a little link pin, so you can click that and view your class and racial traits and features. Okay, so you hit this little button down here, and that toggles these icons here. And then you can hit plus on languages. Languages are nice to add. So common, draconic, dwarvish, elvish, goblin. Common, draconic, dwarvish, elvish, goblin. When I type in different languages, so if I put Gnomish and I type something down here, it will look like this to everyone else, but he can see the translation because he speaks Goblin. Oops, I dragged text into the chat. But so that's the only thing I add on this page. That's the only thing in here that seems to be kind of programmatic, like it knows what you know for languages because of what's on these lines. Other than that, the rest of these are just for player reference, and you can use your D&D Beyond sheet for that. Inventory, we ignore. A couple things will end up in the inventory as we drag them onto the Actions tab if you have weapons, like crossbows and swords and stuff. That's just what Fantasy Grounds does. It knows that they have a inventory slot to take up, so they do. But for spells or anything else, I don't add any other inventory. I don't keep track of treasure or currency or any of that. We don't fill in the Notes tab with all this stuff because that's all in D&D Beyond. This log never gets used. The Actions tab, this is where all the good stuff happens. So I want to find all his actions, and luckily D&D Beyond also has an Actions tab here. So first thing I do is check to make sure that all the possible weapons are equipped. I know that in the game you can't have tons of things equipped, but D&D Beyond doesn't enforce a rule or anything like that, so all the equipping it does logistically is put them here on this Actions tab. So we got a dagger, rapier, and unarmed strike. His unarmed strike does no damage, so I ignore that. There's no dice. So what I'm looking for now are dice formula to roll. So we have a hit formula here, which is a d20 plus 3, and then we have the damage formula here. And so I want that stuff on his sheet. So a dagger. Let's start with a dagger. And so these are the one things I do drag out of here because they come with everything and they don't cause a lot of havoc on the sheet. So I can look for a dagger. If there's multiple results from different modules that I've purchased, I always pretty much try to go with the handbook. It makes these links work so that they can see the details about this weapon. Fantasy Grounds always adds 2 entries because you can take the dagger and stab it, or you can take it and throw it, and so it will add different lines here. It's kind of annoying, but it's alright. So if I think he only had 1 dagger, so I just give it 1 ammo in case somebody does want to use this sheet to track their ammo. I think that's fine. You know, instead of having to edit the item quantity in D&D Beyond every time you shoot an arrow, you can use this for the session, track your ammo usage, and then you could translate it over if you wanted to. Okay, so there's dagger, and now I check the stats. Plus 3, and then 1d4 plus 1, and 1d8 plus 1. Okay? Yep, that looks good. And it's piercing damage. Perfect. Alright, the next one is the rapier. So we'll come back into here. Again, we'll grab the one from the handbook. Plus 3 and 1d8 plus 1 piercing. Perfect. That's right. Okay. And then unarmed strike, you usually have to add manually here. I'll go ahead and show you how to add it, just in case you ever want to. First, make sure this says equipped. It only knows how to deal with things you can actually equip in here. It doesn't really add unarmed strike, and you can't find it as like a weapon or something that you can put on here. You have to just add it yourself. I think it's just because the unarmed strikes are usually pretty straightforward static damage numbers and stuff like that. So unarmed strike, it's plus 1, and then he does no damage. But if he did do damage, I'd come in here and I would change like what kind of damage it is, or add just a static number here, whatever. Oh, that's the attack, excuse me. You come in here and you add damage, that's right. So anytime you see these little buttons, it's like you click that and you get additional controls. It doesn't look like on this one I can right click. It's kind of wonky about when you can do different things, but and then I can say, okay, his damage does 1d4 plus whatever, and I could drag the d4 into this box, and then say plus, there's your plus. In this case, there is no damage, so we're just going to get rid of it, the whole thing altogether. But that's what I would do on a different sheet if they do use their unarmed strike ever. Okay, next spells. He only has a handful of spells here, so it's not too bad, but it's even less. I'm going to add even less things to his sheet than what he has on here. Because minor illusion, you create a sound or an image of an object, blah, blah, blah. There are no rolls in here. There's no saving throws to be made. There's no attack rolls. There's no checks. There's nothing. And so I don't bother copying this spell over because it's just text, and you can get that from right here, from D&D Beyond. Same with message. That's another one. They need to just, well, those are cantrips, so those wouldn't take up spell slots. But when they use, say, comprehend languages, it's another one that, you know, there's no rolls to be made, so there's nothing Fantasy Grounds can do with it except just show the text. So comprehend languages, if you cast that, you just need to hit cast here and burn a spell slot. That's all. Disguise self, same thing. Illusory script. The only one that even does anything is Thunderwave, which makes people roll a Constitution 13 saving throw, and then also does 2d8 thunder damage if they fail, or half that if they succeed. Fantasy Grounds is amazing for dice rolls. Same thing with Phantasmal Force, and that's it. So I think just 2 spells. Yeah. I thought there was more than that, but I think that's it. 2 spells. Okay, so let's make sure. Just double checking, see if I'm overlooking something. But I don't think I am. Sometimes there are features and traits or bonus actions and stuff that do have rolls that I can add on here in Fantasy Grounds, but it doesn't look like it. There's the Jack of all trades. That's why it has proficiency in so many skills. Okay. All right, I think we're good. So let's go ahead and start with Thunderwave. That's his first one that has any rolls to it. It's pretty easy. You can just come to spells. If I don't have the spell, I'd have to manually create it, which I can show how to do. But if I do have the spell, then you can click this to see the text if you want to, and that's all the other spells will have is just this little pin for the text. But it also does, if you change this to actions and standard, and you can class this magnifying glass to make it super simple. It has an attack roll, Constitution DC saving throw of 8, and a damage of 2d8 thunder. You can click and drag. You can just click it once. I'm going to show you how to do targeting in a different video. Let's see here. And then Thunderwave has a Constitution 13. So you'll notice right away we have a discrepancy. If you hover over this, it's a DC 8. If you click it, it'll say 10. And so it's not working properly. Usually the reason is the class sets what skill you cast your spells with. And you'll notice right here, it's blank. So you click the little magnifying glass on the spells category. And if you have spells level 2, spells level 3, there'll be additional headings here. Clicking that magnifying glass brings up this same spells dialog. You might think it's just per group on this page, but it's for all of them. So if I set this to, and I believe it's Charisma, you can find out usually from features and traits, spellcasting. You can cast known bard spells using Charisma. Okay, yeah. So I go ahead and I set this to Cha for Charisma. And then I close that, and then that should fix these formula. Yep, DC 13, and then it looks like the damage is unaffected on that one. Sometimes the damage is affected. And that's it. So now you can use these properly. Now you might be wondering why the person casting Thunderwave is clicking the saving throw button. That's one cool thing about Fantasy Grounds is it will force the victim to roll the saving throw. Which we'll go over in another video because I'm going to go over targeting and stuff as a whole separate video. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. We just got to add the Phantasmal Force one. Okay, so I'll find that in the spells list here. Okay, and then that should hopefully look right. DC 13 intelligence saving throw and a 1d6 psychic. Yep, we're good there. You can collapse that extra stuff. This has other things in here in case there's an attack roll and stuff like that. There's a cast thing. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I guess it would do both rolls. Oh, that's cool. We'll explore that more in the targeting video. That's it. That's how we add spells. I guess we could add one other spell just for fun. Manual spell. Just so you can see what you can do here. You have to kind of come in here and fill this out. So you have to fill out what the spell can do. Let's see, we'll say it's a level 1 spell. Sure, it's a ritual. 1 minute. 20 to 30 feet. Sometimes the syntax in here is picky. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to include the feet or not. Components, verbal, somatic, material, duration. I don't know, 10 minutes. And then I think you can put a description there. I'm not sure. And then, anyway, there's got to be a way. Reparse spell actions. Oh, add action. That's right. You gotta click the spell and add actions. You can add a heal, an effect, a damage. Let's add a cast. There we go. Okay, and then you can hit this little magnifier, and you can add the cast and stuff. So it's a little convoluted to add a spell manually. Luckily, so far, I haven't really had to do that. And even then, sometimes it's just easier to do this. You can type /die. It should be /roll, but /roll ends up rolling against a roll table, which is something different. /die will roll a dice formula, so you can say 1d20 plus 3, and it will roll 1d20 plus 3. You can also type the text in the field and then drag the text down to one of these shortcuts, and then you can click that, and it will do that, which is pretty cool. You can also empty your bookmarks out here. Okay, I think that's everything for this video. That's how I build your guys' sheets. It's probably not super useful. I'll make sure to note that this video is optional. But if you guys are curious how that happens, that's how it happens. So you can see it doesn't have, the fantasy ground isn't really aware of anything you really are. All it does is have a bunch of numbers and then some spells and weapons filled out. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.